Why does Bach provoke such strong reactions? For some people, he is the greatest composer ever lived. For others, he is overrated, overplayed, even forced on them. And what is interesting is not really who is right, but why this music still creates that kind of response at all. One reason is that Bach was not always treated the way he is now. After his death, his music largely fell out of fashion. It was only later, particularly in the 19th century, that he was rediscovered and elevated to this almost untouchable status. So the idea of Bach as a kind of musical giant is, in part, something that has been built over time. And when anything is placed that high, there will always be a reaction against it. There is also the question of the musical canon. Bach sits right at the centre of how music is taught and understood in a Western tradition. For many musicians, that is a foundation, something incredibly rich and rewarding. But for others, it can feel like something imposed, something you are told you ought to admire. And that tension between discovery and obligation is often where the disagreement begins. Then there is the music itself. Bach's writing can feel complete, balanced, inevitable, everything fits. And that can lead to two completely opposite reactions. For some, it is extraordinary, a kind of musical clarity and depth that feels almost limitless. For others, it can feel distant or overly intellectual, as if there is no space left for anything else. There is a parallel here with William Shakespeare. Shakespeare is central to education, constantly analysed, widely performed, yet also resisted for exactly those reasons. People can feel that they are being told how great he is, rather than discovering it for themselves. And I think something similar happens with Bach. But perhaps that is also why the music has lasted. Not because everyone agrees about it, but because it continues to invite different responses. You can approach Bach in many ways, as structure, as expression, as theology, as pure sound. And each of those reveals something different. What I have found over time is that Bach's music tends to open up the more you live with it. Not necessarily in a dramatic way, but gradually. It becomes less about whether it is great or not, and more about what you begin to hear inside it. So perhaps the question is not really whether Bach is overrated or a genius, but why 300 years later, this music still makes people react so strongly. And that in itself is probably a sign that something important is still going on.